Hi, I'm Dave Kale. Welcome to this Christian Business Insights podcast show where my goal is to provide you with practical, actionable ideas to help you create businesses and careers of excellence and at the same time multiply your influence for the kingdom. I have been a Christian in business for over 30 years, and I have personally and contractually consulted with over 500 different sales organizations. So in these podcasts, I combine the lessons that I have learned with an out-of-the-box experience and perspective on Christianity that you will find challenging. And we put that together to provide you with practical insights and ideas that you can use to live better and lead better. Welcome to the journey. Hi, this is Dave. Hey, do you see excellence in your career or your business as having spiritual implications? In other words, being excellent at what you do is a strategy to increase your influence in your community and the world at large. Well, that's what I want to talk about today: gaining influence through excellence. In 2014, Hobby Lobby, which is a Christian-owned company, won a lawsuit at the Supreme Court. You may remember that the lawsuit objected to an Obama administration mandate that companies had to provide a number of contraceptives to their employees at no cost or face large fines for not doing so. Now, this violated the religious convictions held by the company's ownership, and they initiated the lawsuit. Well, the Supreme Court held that the rule violated the religious freedom, which is guaranteed by the Constitution, and that the company, Hobby Lobby, did not have to provide free contraceptives to its employees. Christian business people around the country applauded this victory, seeing it as a victory for religious freedom and a blow to big government encroachment on their freedom. Now, it certainly was that. It was also an example of a deeper principle at work. And the deeper principle at work is this: excellence in business brings with it a disproportionate measure of community and cultural influence. Let me repeat that because it's the theme of this particular piece. Excellence in business brings with it a disproportionate measure of community and cultural influence. I discovered this principle as a young person. In order to work my way through college, I sold men's suits at a higher-end men's clothing store. Even though I was young and not quite full-time, I became the leading salesperson in the company's 5-store chain. And that brought with it recognition and access and influence. A famous clothing designer whose line we featured, Ole Cassini, came to town to promote his line, and I was the only salesperson invited to the cocktail reception for him. When the corporate buyers would visit my store, they made a point to spend some time with me, and I was invited to talk to the company's president on a couple of occasions. At the time, I was just focused on making enough money to support myself and pay my college costs, so I was oblivious to the influence I had gained. It wasn't until years later that I realized my influence was a direct result of the success I had on the job. Then as I moved through my career, I discovered that the principle that business success engenders recognition, access, and ultimately influence, that principle held true for all the years that I made my living as a salesperson. My status as one of the top salespeople meant that when the company president wanted to spend a day riding with a salesperson, he chose me. And when the company was considering a new line, they often ran it by me. I have, of course, seen the same principle work in the hundreds of companies for whom I've consulted over the years. When I interview employees, for example, it would always be the top salesperson who was on the list, chosen to be the spokesperson to the outside consultant. And when decisions were made that impacted the entire sales force, compensation, for example, was one, they would often run it by the top salesperson. In my career as a professional speaker, I had lots of occasions to interface with national trade associations, and I found the principle at work at the company level as well as the individual salesperson level. It was the leading companies in that industry who provided the personnel for the boards and the committees, for example. That particular association's decisions regarding strategic direction, location, and agenda for the annual meetings, etc., those were often made by the principals in that trade group's leading companies. At the company level, excellence in performance brings with it recognition, access, and influence. There's the principle again. Hobby Lobby would not have had the ability to stand for its rights and ours if it were a struggling one-store operation. Its success and industry-leading position put it into a position where it could impact the entire country. There is a lesson in this for Christian business people. We're called to be light in a world of darkness and salt to season our communities and our culture. What better way to do it than become excellent in our professions and leaders in our industries? Influence through excellence ought to be the strategic goal for every Christian business person and every Christian business. When business excellence intertwines with our transparent Christianity, the impact can be enormous. I remember hearing Zig Ziglar speak at the annual conference of the National Speakers Association a number of years ago. The first words out of his mouth were to praise Christ and give a short version of his personal testimony, and then on to a memorable keynote speech. And this to an audience of a couple thousand who were not Christians. Zig set the bar for excellence in his profession and used the influence that came with excellence to point to Christ. We can't be another Zig Ziglar with his influence and platform, but we can have a similar impact on the communities and industries in which we find ourselves. Imagine the impact on our culture, our economy, and political environment if every industry were led by a Christian company. Imagine if the movers and shakers within every profession were the Christians who had earned that position through excellence. If that were the case, we could frame the discussion nationally. We could impact legislation. We could touch and empower millions of citizens. Our commitment to individual responsibility, kindness, fairness, and character development, just to name a few, would leap to the top of the national dialogue. We would have the ear of the lobbyists, and political powers would seek our insights. Millions of employees, vendors, and customers would see what it was like to deal with integrity, love, and concern for our colleagues. People would flock to learn at our feet and see what it was that distinguished our efforts. By the way, if you want to just dig deeper into this, I'd recommend The Good Book on Business. The Good Book on Business. You can get it wherever books are sold. There is a world of recognition, access, and influence that awaits every Christian business person. There is a world of recognition, access, and influence that awaits every Christian business person. Yet we won't begin to realize it until we see that potential and choose to pursue it. Sadly, the vast majority of Christian business people are stopped at the very first step. They never even recognize the possibilities. One of my acquaintances was a principal in an industry-leading Christian company. Despite its position of influence, the owners decided to sell the business and cash out at a relatively young age. That is, of course, the world's recommendation. Unfortunately, the idea of using their influence through their business to impact the community and the culture for the kingdom, that idea, unfortunately, was never given serious consideration. Another, a godly, deeply committed Christian, owned a financial service company that had grown profitable and comfortable. Rather than use the influence that accrued to him because of the excellence of his company, he chose to take more time off and pursue hobbies. Now, there's nothing wrong with pursuing hobbies, but he could have chosen to use some of that time to use his influence to season his industry. From my experience, the world is full of Christian business people who never make the connection between business excellence and Christian influence. Thousands, maybe millions of Christian professionals and business people have the opportunity to impact our community and culture through business excellence. Unfortunately, the overwhelming majority never recognize the opportunity to be salt and light that comes with it. Every Christian business person ought to focus on gaining and using the influence that comes through excellence. If you're really committed to excellence and self-improvement, then you need a source of good information and good content And let me invite you to join my Substack page. Eventually, it will be one page that contains all of my podcasts, all of my blog posts, all of my articles, all of my videos, all for free, in one place. So I'll put a link in the show notes. Please feel free to join and access my content. We're posting 4 times a week. Hope to see you there. Okay, that's it. We're done. Bye-bye.